So, welcome to Creative Conversations. I'm delighted today to be joined by the amazing Andy Bull. Heaps of people know you very well, but for those who don't yet, could you give us a bit of context on your musical history and maybe what you're most proud about so far?
Yeah. Well, I'm a songwriter and a producer, and my main tools, I guess, are keyboards and vocals. In terms of the way I bring the ideas to life. But I've been writing music. I mean, I guess since I was a teenager, and I'm still doing it, and I'm still finding it to be as exciting as it was when I started. And I guess to answer your question, one of the things that I am most proud about is that I've stayed in the craft and have managed to remain engaged and still feel excited by it and rewarded by it and passionate about it. And I still feel like I've got that feeling that I think you ought to have ideally your entire life and careers, and that's that you're still at the beginning of this journey. So even though I've been doing it in one form or another, I still feel like an excited amateur, and that there's still this mystery about it that is worth investigating and engaging in. So I think I think that's probably what I'm most proud of, rather than necessarily individual bodies of work, which I am also really proud of. I think it's just the going through those processes and continuing to go through and still being in it. I think that is that, in like a greater sense, that's probably the bigger achievement, I think, rather than necessarily like specific little moments. Although I have many of those that I'm proud of. I think the way they create a whole story and flight path, if you like, for a whole life. I think just continuing to just keep on flying, I think, is the thing that I realized recently. I'm like, that's kind of a miracle to still be doing it.
Yeah. Well, I'm really glad you're still doing it because I'm a big fan. We're always really enjoyed your work. I mean, musically, we're pretty different, right? Extremely different from each other, but
but whenever we've chatted, it's so funny that this is what I find exciting, because the outcomes are different in how they appear to be constituted. I think the processes that you and I have and the feelings we have about it are very similar. We're singing from the same songbook in that regard, which is cool. And one of the other amazing things is, like, if when you talk to people who aren't even operating in your medium but are like artists or actors, or even less obviously capital C creative forms of expression. So I don't know, maybe they're building some other idea, a business idea. There's still overlap in the way a process is formulated, and the kind of the phases that you go through in creating or manifesting this notion you have into something material. I think there's a lot shared in common, even across mediums, let alone the same medium with different styles, and different purposes.
And I think that's why, I've been so keen to start a series of conversations about the creative process because of what you just said. And I'm kind of curious to uncover, what are the similarities, what are the differences that different art forms have in that creative process. And the reason I'm excited that you're my very first interview is because of the kind of those overlapping chats we've had, given that I'm in a very mellow relaxation kind of genre of music, instrumental music, and you're in that alternative pop. You've had your ARIA nominations, you know, the Vanda and Young awards and things, and big tours, and it's so different to my world. But our chats about the creative process they're so closely related, and that's always really interested me, because I work in a very kind of solo hermit-like fashion when I'm crafting my music. I have it's like a secret world, you know.
Yeah.
And when I stumble across something I feel has got something about it, I just have this amazing feeling that well, until it's released, you know, I'm the only one who knows about this, and I'm thinking, wow, I wonder what potential this piece has out there in the world. What do you have that feeling? And you know, what is it like for you? Because you know, the amount of times I sit in this room and stumble across that beautiful feeling of potential. I think, you know, it's that sense of potential. I'm very interested to know what that would be like for you.
Yeah, I know. I think I know what you're saying, and it's the possibilities that it's like the carrot that is dangled, and you search for those clues of what is it that's waiting to be drawn out of the ether, or maybe that's not the right word, but what can you draw out of your experience or your instruments or your context that that could become something that feels as if it was always there in some form, waiting to be expressed. And I don't know why that's exciting, but it is. And I think that feeling of stumbling upon an idea that has this potential energy, like a seed of an idea, whatever form that takes, whether it's a melody or sometimes in my case a lyric or whatever, just some little snippet that feels like atomic, like it has inside it all this potential energy that is waiting to become expressed in a more full, complex form. I don't know why that's exciting. I think that is, like, at some very basic level, some primal level, is very exciting. And to me, that's one of the things that makes songwriting or the creative process feel like it has some sort of I don't want to use the word metaphysical value, but some kind of greater, harder to define value that speaks to the experience of what it is to be a human anyway. So these ideas are full of potential in the same way that a person is full of potential and could become anything, or I don't know, but that's one of the, when I drill down upon it, like, I think it's a really hard thing to define, because I think it's like an essential quality of, like, that's one of the essential mysteries of the creative process. So even if you, like, you know, this is like a little bracelet that I weaved. You know, you sit down and you weave a thing, or you pick up a stick and you start sharpening it into a poker, or like you sit down in the mud and you start drawing something in the dirt with your feet.
Yeah.
It seems to be there at every level, like a child playing with Lego or something. It seems to be something that you can't actually remove from you can't remove from a person, and it seems to be an expression of a person who is I don't want to say happy, but maybe healthy or something. Like, it's a healthy part of existing. It's just it's an instinct as much as finding higher ground or clean water or a warm place to sleep is.
It's a fundamental,
fundamental.
And as we know, creativity takes on so many forms, like, the world of business is full of creative decisions and creative, inventions and
Right. And I think in sometimes in those worlds, it's about when I'm trying to, like, I'm just riffing here, but make a connection between what does like the business world have in common with something like music. It seems to be like we want to connect things. So we want to connect different nodes of a business person wants to connect people and ideas in order to fill needs, loosely speaking. Creatively, you're trying to connect ideas to fulfill an emotional need, some kind of yearning, something like that.
Yeah.
But a businessman connects people to ideas and people to other people in the same way that someone who's working in more like conceptual arts, like music or art, would connect sounds or palettes or sets of ideas.
Yeah.
And for some reason, that's exciting. That's thrilling. This whole idea of connecting things, I think, and I think this is just a tangent, but one of the things that is exciting about when you stumble upon an idea that feels like it has potential, I think part of the excitement is that you feel like you're connecting, like you're
to that place.
Yeah. Vangelis, the guy who did the Blade Runner, original
Chariots
Blade
of
Runner
Fire.
and everything. Yeah, all that stuff. So he recently died, and there was, in my feed, a quote appeared of his saying that he considered himself to be just like a plastic tube, like a conduit between ideas and technology.
Yeah.
And I think that's what's exciting about discovering that idea, because that's a moment of interface that you have with the world. That's how I describe it, having interface. And I think everyone wants to have interface with the world, whether you're making music or listening to it. You're trying to connect to some like highway of information or shared experience or culture or some information that's physically stored that occurs to you, and you want to become a channel to the next node of its movement.
It's all connected.
That sounds, exactly. The thing, I try to talk about these things as materially as possible. Because you can still connect shitty ideas. I'm not saying any of this stuff makes what you do good, or it's not it's not holy or sacred or in any way that you can describe. It's not like this is not a moral thing. I think it's just an instinctual thing that you actually do want to be a conduit. You do want to connect things, and you do want to have interface with your materials and other people in the same way that, neurons in your brain are always putting out their little tendrils to talk to other neurons to make those connections. I think that process of increasingly complex connection is what the internet is. I think it's what a brain is. I think it's what people sitting around a campfire talking is.
Yeah.
If you if you really reduce everything to its most symbolic allegories or whatever the term you want to use is, we're all just like nodes that seeking connection to our world and our experience and other people. Everything's seeking to become more connected and more complex, and then our old connections die away and are rediscovered. But this whole process of like tendrils coming out into the world, grabbing onto other tendrils that are also reaching, seems to be a part of what creativity is.
We need that.
Yeah, absolutely.
I've always wondered, with your successful singles, like, you talk too much, keep on running, etc. It's all connected. When you were composing those pieces that have done really well, was there a different vibe or different inner feeling for you in the studio when you were doing those pieces that translated to out there in the world, compared to other pieces? Or, was that a very specific feeling for you that you thought this is going to do well, or I feel it has an enormous potential to do well, and then it goes on to do just that? Like, tell me about that.
When I think once upon a time, a long time ago, I remember hearing someone saying to me something like, oh, you know, when it's good, it just happens easily. You don't even have to think about it. It just falls out of the sky. And I don't necessarily think that's always right. I think that is sometimes true, or true in moments of a creative process. But to give a very short answer to your question is no, it's not possible to say based on the process what the outcome is going to be. I don't think, not in my experience, not always. And the feeling of instantaneousness or ease, or that feeling of something just falling out of the sky, like that sometimes happens, and sometimes it's much more menial, slow decision making, trying things, paring things back, pruning, rearranging. But I don't think that either one of those things necessarily dictates the quality of the outcome in any meaningful way. I think that the nature in which the idea arrives is somewhat arbitrary. So I've had songs that okay, so here's a really good example. So about 8 years ago, I made an album called Sea of Approval, and it went on to do, you know, reasonably well. But the first songs I recorded for that album, the very first was a song called Talk Too Much. And it was the first time I'd ever sat down in a studio to as producer myself. So I'd written songs and I'd produced demos and stuff, but I'd never sat down with the intent before of seeing, can I take a song from demo to like final master and release? And Talk Too Much was the song that I was going to try that on. So I booked a studio session. I just tried to keep everything as contained as possible. I had this song, I had a demo, I got a band to re-record it. I took the stems from that recording session. I used the drums only in the end from that recording session.
Right, wow.
And I went down and I sat in the studio for the first time ever, and it wasn't in my studio. And I spent the first day like working out the patch bay, like where do I have to plug things in what needs to work. There were these, you know, analog compressors and EQs and things that I hadn't really used before. So I was like, firstly working out how to even route them through to get into the converter, and then working out settings. And so it was what the point I'm making is, it was a really steep learning curve, and I spent about 4 weeks just working on that song, because that song for me was not just about working on that song, but actually working out my whole process for how was I going to do this whole album. What limitations was I going to set for myself? So what instruments would I use? How many tracks was I going to let myself use? What were the tools? As well as the tone, the palette of sounds, all these questions about arrangement plus tech questions. Like, it was a real learning curve, and it took me, like I say, 4 weeks to just do this one song. And for 4 weeks I was like, there's no way I can do this. I was like, I'm really out of my depth here. I can sing and I can play keyboards and I can write songs, but all this other shit is beyond me. Like, I don't know how to manage all the tech stuff, all the tech issues. Like, what, you come in one day and stuff doesn't plug in. Like, it was not a pleasant experience. And I redid like half a dozen versions of it, trying every different iteration. Anyway, the upshot of all this is that it was not fun. But the outcome was, in the end, I arrived at something that was like, it's done. That's how I want it to sound. Yes, this gives me a template now for the rest of my record.
Right.
Not only in terms of outcome of like how things should the sonic world things should sound in, should sit in, but the process of like, okay, maybe I start with drums and vocals. I add this. I make sure there's only one of these happening. If I use this keyboard one time, I don't use it. I don't overdub two. There can only be one of this. Like, everything has to. Making that architecture, that the substructure of what it's going to be, and it was really painful, but the outcome was really good. But then I finished it, and I was like, that was like, psychically distressing experience. And then the next day, I had another day in the studio that I was borrowing from a friend, and I opened up a file of audio that I had forgotten we had recorded during that Talk Too Much session, and it was just my drummer playing this riff that I had beatboxed or whatever to him during while we were pulling sounds. I said, Carlos, I had this idea. It came to me last night. Could you do this thing at this tempo? And I made the sounds, and he riffed on it for whatever it was, 5 minutes as we, pull sounds. And I pulled up this audio, and I was like very excited by what I heard. The drumming was really excited, and it just immediately suggested to me, I've got this other verse I've been carrying around for a year that I haven't been able to finish or fit in anywhere. And I just started playing those chords over, and then immediately got to the point where I would normally stop because I didn't have a chorus, and just kept playing, like improvised a thing. And I realized, this is the chorus. And so after about 2 hours, pretty much the entire song was done. And then I spent 3 hours just overdubbing some guitar and stuff, and then put down the vocal line and doubled some vocals and stuff. And that song was exciting and fun and pain-free and cathartic and amazing, and like felt destined and all this kind of crap. And it was done in a day. But at the end of that, I had 2 songs that 8 years later sound equally good to me. They sit in the same world.
Interesting.
I still love to play them. They both did well, but the process of getting there was night and day. So that's a very, very, very long answer to the question that you asked.
But that's amazing. I've experienced similar things. Firstly though, what song was that other one? The one that came
Keep On Running. So that ended up,
so another popular one.
Yeah, and it did have something really. We went with that one as the first single, and that kind of blew the doors open for me. So it did have something really immediate, and yes, and maybe that is. I don't know that it's immediate because the process was immediate, or the process was immediate because the song was just easy to write, and so it was easy to write. It's hard to say what influenced what, but I've had that experience so many times since, where something I've labored over becomes amazing, and something that's fallen out of the sky has also become amazing. And conversely, I've labored over things that just never got to where they needed to be. And I've had ideas fall out of the sky that were like kind of incomplete or not very sophisticated, or they seemed exciting, but don't have that thing that you want to keep listening to over time. So the upshot seems to be like just to reserve judgment. And while you're in the process, not to try to decide the value of the outcome.
You have to be focused and present and giving your all and making those intuitive decisions, and being in the moment and doing the best for that piece. You certainly can't be thinking beyond that moment in time, because then obviously you're not giving it your most clear creative juice.
Well, you're either doing it or not doing it. So thinking about doing it, you can't sort of. I mean, you can plan to have a vision and everything, but while you're in the act of doing it, you're either playing the chords or you're not playing the chords. Like So even in a long process, it has to feel. You do have to make it as spontaneous as possible, or you need to be as spontaneously engaged in it as possible. And then decide whether what you've done is working for it or not. But sometimes it's just faster, and you get to those solutions faster, and other times your first solutions or second solutions or third aren't quite right, and you need to keep going. But it's really, I found it really useful to take the expectation out of it, and also to not think about it as some sacred process that needs to be this way or another, or if it were right, it would feel this way. It doesn't feel that way. It's none of that stuff is helpful.
So you, with your It's All Connected, that was a big break, between the Sea of Approval album and then the release of that single. Was there a different creative process after such a long gap in time, or not really? Or?
Well, I mean, that's another interesting one, because that, I had some of the lyrics and some of the very, very like nascent ideas for that song like 10 years ago.
Oh, really?
I just hadn't committed them to a recording, or so they'd been some of them, not the entire song, just like certain lines and a chord, part of the chord progression stuff had been floating around for ages. But when I came back to it, yeah, that was a different process. When I started trying to record that song, which was like 4 years ago, and I didn't finish it for 2 years. Yeah, it was like 2 years between putting down the initial drum take to putting down the last vocal. That was somewhat a different process in that initially it had been a band recording. So I'd gone in and after doing Sieve Approval, that whole album just is so much solitude and being in the studio and playing all the instruments myself and going through just a really long drawn out process of making layer by layer. But I just thought I didn't want to do that again because I wanted some other people's energy and I wanted to be more of a social experience. And so when I initially recorded the beds for that song, which was guitar, bass, drums, and I think I put my keys down, we recorded it all to tape, but I didn't have chorus. I had some lyrics. I just put down like a mud map and then kept coming back to it over the course of about 2 years. And those 2 years, just because, life was busy and much other things going on. So I would come to it when I could. But that process, that second half of the process was, again, like being alone in a room, moving arrangement things around, speeding it up, changing a lyric, recording things. So again, I couldn't, as much as I tried to avoid it, I couldn't avoid the fact that eventually I was going to be alone in a room working on this thing.
Yeah.
So it did, like against my wishes, go back to that solitary process of discovery. And as much as I tried to involve other people along the way, the answers all had to come from myself because the suggestions other people made sometimes were helpful, but 1 out of 10 times only, and the other 9 out of 10 times was like not helpful and sometimes destructive. So I would go, oh yes, like I can't finish the song, what do I need to do? And they go, oh, you just need to do this thing, and I try it and it would just mess the whole thing up. So the answers were I still had to find them, which I find really frustrating because I wish I could just like dial up someone and go, tell me the answer, and I could just do this quickly. But I can't seem to erase, there's like a necessary amount of time or a journey that things have to go through. Little discovery, epiphanies you have to have. Oh, it's got to go to this thing here, or it's not working because I'm doing this when it should be doing this other thing. And those things just take like perspective, and perspective takes time because you're so close to it that you need to have enough distance from it that you forget all the conversations you were having in your head about it and hear it just like a normal person again.
Totally.
And then you get that spontaneous answer again. So you capture that, and then you've got to give yourself more space. So building time into the creative process, I've found essential, and I've found it essential as well too. Recently, I've been having a lot of luck with, I do my own rough mixes, but the final mixes I like to get someone else to do because I just find like I get a better result. I get other ideas. People hear certain aspects of the song as being the obvious lead things that I hadn't occurred to me, or all those sorts of things. So I like to give some song to someone else to mix. And recently I've been once upon a time I always just mix analog. We would go into the studio, we would have to have it done that day, but and that you get an amazing result, but you can't change it. If you want to do a recall, you've got to hire the studio again. It was really arduous. And if I had like a SSL console here and a tape machine and all that kind of stuff here and all the outboard gear, maybe doing recalls and tinkering and stuff would be more accessible. But I've tried to, I've found some people now who can do things for me in the box, and we can recall things, and their system is like a hybrid system, so you can get all the analog joy and all that kind of stuff if you get off on that. But I can a week later go, oh, hey, I just realized I actually need to put a vocal ad lib in that first chorus, and I had it in the second chorus, and it's not an ad lib, it's actually a hook, but I didn't realize because it was just off the cuff when I did it. Now that I've been listening to it for 2 weeks, like every time I get to that chorus, I want to sing that ad lib because it's a hook, really. And so I can just like sing a vocal in, flick it over email, and the guy will just put it in. and we'll go, how do you
yeah.
feel about that? And I can spend a week thinking about that, you know? So building time in, even though I love this idea of just being like decisive and like just knowing it, the reality is I got so much stuff going on and so much of other life going on
Yeah.
that you don't necessarily always have the mental resources to be as focused as you need to be. So you need to allow time.
Yeah. And there's a saturation factor, don't you find? Like
Yes.
I'll often, something I think is really strong the night before, I listen to it the next morning and go, what was I thinking? You know, it's like
The thing is, you don't know if you're right that morning or the night before. You actually don't know. That's the thing. You try to go, I was right last night, or I'm right now. It's like you don't know now.
Yeah.
So you need to make sure your process allows for either possibility to emerge as the right one. And there's just no shortcutting it. That's what I find so frustrating about
yeah. You can't be in a rush. It's just part of the deal, isn't it?
Yeah.
So you're working on some new material at the moment, which I'm very glad that you are. Can't wait to hear it. In fact, I saw a little snippet on socials yesterday.
Yes.
I really like it. Is that did you get a sax player in?
Yeah. I got a guy called Jimbo who I've known for years, who actually played on my first record.
Right.
As part of the horn section on that.
Yeah.
And
sounded amazing, by the way. I love the clip. I love the clip. And thanks. I love that dude who did the rap on it spontaneously.
Yeah, that's what the internet's for. So I posted the clip, and I don't usually post like clips of unreleased material. I'm trying to save my powder.
Yeah.
And so when people, get the record, they can kind of go into the world. And after I'm making music for a record, not for social media. That's my philosophy anyway. But I shared this snippet, and it was cool because the song's called Leader that I shared the clip from, and Matt O'Kine, who had been a host on Triple J, who has a podcast and stuff now. So I met him through doing interviews on air with him.
Yeah.
He just did a screen grab and put down a few bars of rapping over the top, which was really neat, really cool, because
he did a great job.
Yeah, you get this this exchange and this kind of that the fun of that whole thing, like a bootleg collaboration, which I wasn't thinking about that when I recorded the song.
No.
But then you go, oh, okay, there's other ways that this music can, because it's living now. It's, the music lives in the world by people interfacing with it. So that's a cool, novel way of interfacing that maybe I hadn't considered before.
Yeah. Look, I'm excited about this new work, because just that little snippet, I thought, very nice indeed. Is the creative process, any different for you right now with this new work, or is it, pretty much the same recipes we've just been talking about? Or
it's still a mix. I mean, that song again was one of these ones that I recorded with a band, and I tried to capture as much, because I had this notion that I wanted to capture as much live, kind of spontaneous people in the room stuff as possible as a basis, and then invariably, I add things to it, and it becomes recognizably, or even more recognizably mine as I sing on it and everything like that. But I wanted to begin with, like I say, just be with other people, and for the recording to feel like a social experience and a fun one. And I'd started recording that stuff having toured for like 2 or 3 years really consistently, and I wanted to capture what I felt like was a really nice energy on stage. I wanted to like get some of that and put it on record, because there hadn't really been much of that on Sea of Approval, the previous record. That was more electronic, me in a room layering things. And I was really excited by this other possibility of getting the energy of friends recording. So I did half the record is very much in that world, and there's like the sax player, or he's on a couple of tracks, and then there's even some strings, but there's a lot of live bass, and all of this tracking together onto tape, where I felt like we could capture something spontaneous and hold it there, and not just build it up piece by piece in like digital land. But it always ends up kind of becoming a hybrid for me again. And recently I've been working a lot more just on my own again, but I'm
Yeah.
trying to bring the philosophy of like, I'd still try to, when I produce it, the music now, I still have in my mind that there's this band and there's this friendship between instruments, and the arrangement is it's something that could be played live and still be recognizable.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
so even though my process it has, for the tail end of this record, come back to being just me again on my own, it feels like it has transformed. It actually feels like a very different solitude to the solitude of my
Right,
previous record. Yeah.
right,
Which has
right.
been
Nice.
amazing, because it's a really hard thing to describe, but it feels, when I come into the room now, it feels more spontaneous, and I have this
Yeah,
imaginary band now for some of
yeah.
those things. So the outcome still feels like it's a part of that world, even though that process is a little different.
It sounds like a lovely recipe where you got that live energy of the band um,
Mm.
impregnated into the song, and
Yeah.
it's not going to disappear. You've got that. You've harnessed that, bringing it back into your studio, and then do all that slow time, using
Yeah.
time and the quality control
Yeah.
to get it right, and take as long as you need, like we've
And you
been
get all
talking
the
about.
yeah, you get all the little Easter eggs that the players put in for you as well. You discover them as you're working alone. There'll be some little phrase that the bass player will do, or a little
Yeah,
fill
nice.
that the drummer's done, and it feels surprising and fun, like a discovery. Like, not everything exists there only because you've put it there. You
Yeah,
get these little freebies, yeah, that you can vibe off.
yeah, cool. So,
Yeah.
are you going on to metaphorical tape or real tape in this day and age, or?
For all the band stuff that we did, we went on to actual tape. Yeah,
Wow,
so
that's
a
cool.
studio. I recorded a studio in Marrickville called Golden Retriever Studios, and they've got a
Right,
tape machine. They've got this amazing large live tracking room there that we could all fit into, and they've
nice.
got a studio tape machine that had come from like the Berlin Opera or something like that
Yeah,
once upon a
cool.
time. So yeah, for much of that tracking, we did it to that. I mean, in truth, the way, like, plugins and tech and everything are now, you can make something sound convincingly analog. It's not really about the sound, although there is that. It's something about the way it shapes the process
Yeah,
that was appealing. Like the
yeah,
excitement of like roll tape and then we will
yeah,
play. Yeah, it's that it felt novel, and I just think having that novelty is still an important part of a process, that it should feel novel, even if the novelty is, semi-imagined or something.
yeah, yeah.
It should still feel fun, like you're doing something that's, you're toying around with stuff. So
That's a wonderful,
that was the MO, yeah.
yeah, wonderful combination of old and new worlds
Mm.
coming together there. There
And
wouldn't be
that's
many people even bothering to go to tape at all
no,
these days,
and
I would
if you're
imagine.
being totally rational about it, it's like, why would you? And you
Yeah,
you can do it at certain points. Like, I think if plenty of people, they'll record digitally or whatever, but then they'll mix on tape, or even they'll record and mix digitally, but then they'll bounce down the mix onto tape for some kind of sonic
mm,
effect, like what it does to the saturation or gluing the
yeah,
thing together. People come up with all kind of reasons for why they use it. But I don't know. They're fun. It's just having something physical, I think, still feels appealing. Like,
yeah,
um, still actually having an analog synthesizer as opposed to doing everything soft. I don't know, that's not like an objectively true fact. It's just a true fact for me. I still like to have some things to twiddle and have a physical interface with, so
yeah,
it's not so cerebral. And also it helps you to define the limitations of the project. Like,
mm,
these are the tools I'm using. Everything
mm,
has to be used within these tools and in the limitations of those tools. And then that I think is actually a really important part of the creative process, is having your limitations. So doesn't have to be tape, and for certain genres, it just makes no sense to go to tape. So, um,
yeah,
but you need to choose some tools that make sense for your project and the feeling and maybe time or place that you're trying to evoke in the music,
yeah,
and
yeah,
decide what those tools are, and use as few as possible for the majority of the time, and that enriches the quality of the process immeasurably, I think.
the challenge of playing live as a band, and getting it right onto tape creates its own excitement. That's a bit very different to just, you know, layering track by track in the digital world.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's all kinds of nice little like quirks, like you get a little bit of tape sound or whatever, which is quite evocative. Like it helps to create a sense of space and occasion, and that's one of the big things I've really tried to harness for all my recent stuff, is a sense of occasion. That the music is a song that really happened. It's a performance that really happened, that we captured, and it happened in a place and a time and a space with real people. For some reason, to me, that just became the exciting thing.
Yeah.
As opposed to in the past where I was more excited by showcasing my ideas, and my ability to do all those ideas on my own, which is also exciting. But for some reason, after having done that, this was like the next thing that felt like it would be rewarding. And every time I hear the songs I recorded in that format, those things really come out to me, like they feel special. And because they're harder to do, technically speaking, they're actually more rare, I think, because they're expensive and they're unwieldy and they take time and coordination. Like anyone can sit down and, well, this is, I'm not casting aspersions or judging this, but anyone can get Logic and a MIDI keyboard and do things using those two tools. It's very accessible, and that's amazing, and I benefited greatly from that. But there's something more rare, I think, about the occasion and the difficulty of getting everyone together that just makes the outcome feel a little or sound a little different. And that, for some reason, is important to me.
I think it's kind of like a risk reward ratio that you get some payback from, don't you? For taking that risk live, you know, to tape, and you kind of reap the benefits of that when it goes well.
Yeah, that's right. And you discover things together, like you know, just like in a live performance, you'll do something that will inspire something in the other player and vice versa. And so the dynamics of the thing you're working on and the energy, it emerges together spontaneously at the same time. And also talks to the room that you're in, like the sound of the room responds and everything is responding to one another.
Yeah.
Which it creates a certain kind of outcome. And I think it can imbue the project with certain subtleties and little details that are rewarding on repeated listens too.
Yeah. Nice. Yeah, there'll be Easter eggs for us to listen to when it's released. Does it, because of that live process in the recording, does that make it translate back to live performance a bit easier, or?
Well, I think that was the intention, but the reality is every time you play, like, you know, sometimes I'll be playing them solo or as a duo or a trio. So every time you reinvent it anyway. And that was one of the big learnings from the previous record that I did so much of my own. When we came to do it live, we reinvented everything.
Right.
What were the key parts? So if you boil it down to its essence, what could you then reinterpret? Carry through. And then it becomes this other amazing thing. And that was really eye-opening to me, because these songs I'd written suddenly became even more exciting. We did we had one of our shows recorded for Triple J did this thing called Live at the Wireless, where they come to your show, and we were playing down at the corner in Melbourne, and they recorded one of our shows. We had a couple of shows down there, and they recorded the first one. And listening back to those recordings is amazing, because the song's recognizable. It's still from that world, but it's just this whole other beast. It's got this whole other energy that isn't there in the recordings, because how could it be?
Yeah.
So that was really eye-opening to me. And that's partly what I wanted to try to capture going forward. Yeah. But you still have to reinterpret every time you play live. You have to make some choices, because there's sometimes only one of you, or you're limited, or you're in a venue that has limitations or you just want to reinterpret things, you know, sometimes we'll change time signature or key
Yeah.
or whatever, you know, change the main instruments that it's on. But for me, in my case, because they're songs that I'm singing, often the one thing that really holds it all together is just the fact that it's my voice singing those songs, those melodies and those words, and
Yeah.
almost anything underneath is up for grabs, really.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. And your voice is so unique that that would be even more the case, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I think that's been helpful for me. And sometimes when I'm wondering what it is I'm trying to achieve, I remember that mostly what people listen to when they listen to my music is just my voice anyway. So that kind of frees me up, allows me to explore different ideas and not worry too much about whether these separate songs sit alongside one another, because so long as it's my voice and my affect and everything, then they're coming from the same narrator. So
Yeah.
which has been really good, because I like to try a lot of different things. So it once I kind of got that in my head, that I am the common factor, it did allow me to try ideas that I would have thought were prohibitively different. Like sometimes I'll work with I'll produce other artists, and they'll be like, they'll have these songs, and they'll be very concerned that the songs don't sit alongside, like it's too many styles. But to me, it's not that different at all. Like, and I have to convince them, like, it really doesn't sound. These can all go on an album together or an EP together. The differences are way more imagined than you think, because so long as it's you performing it, it actually comes out pretty consistent.
Yeah.
Within reason, obviously, but
Yeah.
yeah.
So what's the timeline, do you think, on the new material, or do you have no idea on that yet?
No,
Or
I'm increasingly getting an idea. So I mean, I've been working on it for years, just chipping away, and I feel like the album is finished enough for me to start releasing things, which is really exciting. And I feel really confident about all the whole suite of music that's coming out, that it's where it should be, and it all fits alongside and tells a story. So I'm ready to start putting it out. So I'm actually now in the process of, I mean, at the time of recording, what are we in June? Are we in June 2022 at the moment? At the time of recording this, I'm presently now like scheduling out the releases for the rest of the year and into
cool.
2023, which is just a ridiculous thing to say, 2023.
Yeah, that's exciting.
But it's I feel like it's happening. But I'm so like I'm so cautious about saying anything, or like getting ahead of myself, because it's such a long process between coming up with your first song idea to having a finished album that's released. The hundreds and hundreds of things that have to happen in between the beginning and the end, it boggles. If you look at it all at once, it just boggles the mind. So you have to just take it as it comes, step by step. You can take two steps forward, one step back, just the whole way. So I'm being very tentative and cautious, but I feel more confident now about beginning the release process, which I see releasing music as a part of the creative process. I don't think it's something that happens after. I don't think it's like you finish your creative process then you put it out. I just think it makes more sense to see it as a part of the process, because what happens in that release affects the next step in your process. Like you can't so easily tease all these things apart into separate blocks, even if it's a long time in between steps. So I feel more confident now about going into this next part of the creative process than I have in 6 years. That's
good. That's a good sign.
Yeah,
because the whole promo landscape is forever changing and very different to 6 years ago, and 8 years ago was Sea of Approval.
It's wildly
it's
different how much has changed.
It's unrecognizable, isn't it?
Yeah.
So that makes a lot of sense. But look, I'm sure there's millions of fans very excited and eager to
billions, Ian.
yeah, that can't wait to hear it, and I'm one of them.
Oh, thanks, Ian.
I wish you enormous deserved success with your new releases.
Thank you very
and
much.
No doubt you've probably got some live action planned.
Yeah, some shows that will be announced for the end of 2022, and then hopefully much more in 2023. Yeah,
I wish you all the best with your new work. Can't wait to hear it.
Thanks to you too, and congratulations with all the releases you've done. It's been awesome to see you sharing your process and the outcomes. It's beautiful. We listen to it all the time.
Oh, thank you, mate. Appreciate it. Yeah, it's keeping me sane, especially the last couple of years, which I'm sure is the case for a lot of people with their creative endeavors. Like it's never been more important, has it, than the last few years? And you know, whether it's balancing spreadsheets and feeling good about that, and or you know, building stuff or creating music, it doesn't matter what it is. Just keep creating, everyone. You know, it's good for our mental health, if nothing else. Hey,
100%. Yeah, it doesn't feel so flippant anymore to say that.
That's right. And you know, the real bonus is that it has all those benefits along the way, and then when you release it, if other people really dig it, well, it's a beautiful full circle experience, isn't it? Where they're feeling what you felt when you were creating it. And I love it when that happens, you know, when your listeners give you feedback that kind of mirrors what you were feeling when it was first coming together. I really love that kind of feedback. It's a beautiful thing, and you just think, magic, absolute magic.
Yeah, you do feel like you are connecting to some common experience and not just some lunatic in a room.
Yeah, that's right, the hermit. All right, mate. Well, thank you so much. And until next time.
Right on.
Cheers, mate.